Shabbos, and we celebrated, of course, the fact that Am Yisrael received the Torah. So I thought, I was looking what we could learn together, and there are two sikkahs from the Rebbe, one in volume 2, and the other one I'll come to in a minute, where the Rebbe talks about what Torah really is. And I thought we'd go through that, because if we just receive something, you want to know the value of it, you want to know what it's for. What is it that we say we learn? Let's just go back a step. We say that a Jew's life is the empowerment of living by bringing spirituality into physicality and elevating physicality into spirituality, and we do that by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. So what does it mean, Torah? What does it mean that we just received the Torah on Matan Torah and we've celebrated that on Shavuos? What do we mean by Torah? So let's go through it quickly. Everybody knows that the 10 Commandments were given by Hashem to 3 million odd people, 600,000 males, about the same amount of females, and the rest children, and they all heard Hashem's voice, in inverted commas, giving the Torah. So the Torah that was given at that point was only the Aseret Adibros, the 10 Commandments. After that, as you know, Moshe is called up to Sinai, and he goes up and spends 40 days and 40 nights there, learning Torah. What Torah does he learn? He is learning the written Torah that we learn on Shabbos. Exactly, letter for letter, word for word, exactly, except for two letters that are in dispute, 3,500 years, continent after continent, with no contact between people for all that period of time, and yet the document is pristine except for 2 letters. That Torah was dictated, in inverted commas, to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai, on Mount Sinai, and then everybody knows the story with the Luchos, and he broke the Luchos and another set of Luchos. But the Torah that we learn in Shul, that we read in Shul, is the written notes of what he got from God for 40 days and 40 nights. And now, if you read the Torah from cover to cover at a normal speed, it's not going to take you 40 days and 40 nights. If you had to write it, it wouldn't take you 40 days and 40 nights. So the question is, it says he didn't sleep, he didn't eat. So what was he doing for the 40 days and 40 nights? So we learn that he was getting what we refer to as the oral law. Now, the oral law was the background to those written notes, which are what we learn in Shul, and that oral law, which is made up of a few stages of development. First of all, the oral law and the Midrash and and Kabbalah and Hasidus, as we'll see in a moment, was all given to Moshe Rabbeinu in those 40 days and 40 nights. The oral law was given to Moshe Rabbeinu on condition that it should be memorized, not written down. And so for a long period of time, the only document that existed in relation to Torah was the scroll, the Sefer Torah. Then, when he was worried that the Romans were going to extinguish Yiddishkeit, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi decreed that the oral law which they had been learning verbally off by heart, has had to be written down. And the first articulation of that is called the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the first articulation of the written down oral law. Then the second articulation of that is called the Gemara, and both the Mishnah and the Gemara make up what is called the Talmud. I'm sure most people know all this. I'm just revising it so that we're all on the same page. So the Mishnah and the Talmud are about Jewish law. There's some stories and there's some allegories and there's some other things, but fundamentally we're talking about law. We're talking about a system of living for Jews and how they should live. Now, at the same time that Moshe Rabbeinu was receiving the oral law, he received what is written down in what's called the Medrash. The Medrash is the background to the stories and the events and the happenings related in the written Sefer Torah. So you have Sefer Torah, which is written. Now we have the Mishnah and the Gemara, which is the oral law, which is now written. The Medrash, which is a written version of the background to the Chumash, and then there's a secret side to all of that, which was the Kabbalah, and all of that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai, and all of it was given on the basis that Am Yisrael would spend the rest of history between Matan Torah and the coming of Mashiach in learning those aspects of Torah and plumbing the depths of those deeper and deeper. What wasn't revealed until 300 years ago is Hasidus. Hasidus is a version of the Kabbalah. Kabbalah is the mechanics of the secret side of Torah. It enables action. If you know the secrets of Kabbalah, that's not what Hasidus is. Hasidus is really a pathway to understanding the background to everything we said above. In other words, the background to the Chumash, a background to all the law, and it gives you, it is the soul of the body of Torah. So you have the body of Torah, which is made up of the things that we've just been through, and then you have its soul. The soul of all of that is Hasidus, and that's what in Chabad the Rebbeim are keen for all Jews to learn, because we have a tradition that when the wellsprings of Hasidus is spread amongst ordinary Jews who don't necessarily qualify to understand it on its own, then we're going to have Mashiach. So that's what we celebrate. That's what we celebrated last week. So what I'm going to take you through is in Halik Bays, in this Sikha on this week's Parashat, BEHAALOTECHA, and what the Rebbe does there is to take you through Hasidus with a different perspective of understanding its essence. So in order to do that, and we'll come back to that, I want to start with maybe explain it, just give you an overall perspective like this. For a Jew to function in his life in a purposeful manner, we accept that we're shluchim of Hashem, in order to bring Ruchnius into Gashmis and elevate Gashmis into Ruchnius as we keep learning. But in order to do that, we have to subscribe to a way of life dictated by Hashem. And we believe that it's our shlichus, it's our job in our life to be in service to Hashem for Hashem's work. That work is learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. So let's take an example. We have a mitzvah, as everybody knows, there are three levels of mitzvahs. There's mishpatim, there are edus and hukim. Mishpatim mean laws which appeal to our logic, and that we assume that no Jew would want to live without these laws because they're what dictates civilization, such as not to murder, not to steal. Then you have edus, which are things where we wouldn't come to that conclusion logically on our own, but once we're shown the mitzvah, the logic appeals to us, like Shabbos. You wouldn't come to Shabbos on your own, but once you understand what Shabbos is about, you begin to see the benefits and the logic of it. And then there's hukim, which means those mitzvahs where we simply have no understanding whatsoever, such as Pora Duma, the red cow, such as shatnez, mixing wool and linen, in fact all kilai, mixing various things that make no apparent sense at all. And finally, for example, kashrus. Kashrus makes no sense whatsoever. If you think kashrus has anything to do with health, you don't get it at all. It's got nothing to do with health. If Hashem is clever enough to give you a digestive system that can digest meat, it can also digest milk. And at the same time, it's not going to be any more difficult for Hashem to design us to be able to eat meat and milk together. So these mitzvahs, the law in the Mishnah and in the Talmud, and even the Midrash, gives you and me arguments and for understanding these mitzvahs to a certain extent. So the mishpatim, we understand that you don't murder. Edus, we understand that we have to have yontif and so on. And hukim, we don't understand much at all, but we do it anyway out of obedience, and that's our virtue, that we do it out of obedience. Comes Chassidus and says, darlings, you can learn much more about it than this. We'll teach you the soul of these mitzvahs. So I'll give you an example. You have a mitzvah of not to murder, and that seems very fair. So you and I would think, without Chassidus, that murder is a logical imperative, and you can't murder because we don't want to be Nazis. We don't want to be. Jews have never been violent, while non-Jews have been doing what they've been doing throughout history. Yisrael have been sitting and learning. We have almost no history of physical violence. We have no history of beating up our wives, God forbid. This is all alien to us. However, comes Chassidus and says, don't be so sure that it's only because it's logical. And the Rebbe gives an example. Let's say that you're in a hospital room, and in that hospital room there are two patients, one on the bed on the right and one on the bed on the left. The one on the bed in the right is a 90-year-old, 100-year-old Rosh Hashanah, a really evil man, self-confessed evil. He stole, he cheated, he robbed, he bashed, He burnt down people's houses. He violated every single conceivable sin. And in the other bed lies a 20-year-old young mother who's just given birth to her first baby child, which is beautiful. And she is beautiful, pure as the driven snow, never sinned in her life. Into the room comes a gangster, and he says, shoot the old guy, the Russia, or I'm going to shoot the girl. Can you shoot him? What do you think?
No.
Huh? In Jewish law, you cannot shoot him. Why? It's murder. Are you telling me that she's going to be murdered? The logic is that it's better to kill him. He's a nasty bastard. He's been at 100 years of age. Why should she's got a whole life ahead of her. She's never sinned in her life. We're not allowed to make these heshbonos. We're not allowed to murder. So if he says, you have to murder the old man, otherwise I'm going to murder the girl, you can't murder the old man. Are you telling me the girl's going to die? Let's say that she is, God forbid. We don't make the Torah. We have to believe in our God. Our God will take care of it. What happens to the girl and the child and in another Gilgul, we don't know any of that. One thing we do know, we're not allowed to kill the first guy. Now, that's halakha. That's law. That's got nothing to do with the Hasidus of the soul of that matter. The soul of that matter will take you to a level where you do understand it. I'll give you another example. We're not allowed. We can't mix meat and milk. Everybody knows that. But that doesn't mean that you can eat meat after milk. You can't eat milk after meat. What's the difference? So in halakha, the difference is given for various reasons. And none of those reasons really appeal to anybody, and these are, because it's one of the hukim, and it's one of the mitzvahs that we keep out of obedience. So where's the mila? Where's the advantage of keeping the mitzvah? The advantage is that you are obedient to your God. Comes Hasidus and says, look, what's the real reason? The real reason is that milk is chesed and meat is gevura. Now, if you've got a child and the child's misbehaving, and you have to educate that child not to misbehave, if you start with gevura and beat up that poor kid, and then after that apologize to it and kiss it and cuddle it and hug it, you're going to bring up a tainted child. If, on the other hand, you deal with it first with love and kindness, then afterwards you can be as strict as you like. If the child is convinced that you're doing it out of love, then there'll come a point where the child will accept the gevura. So that's Hasidus giving a deeper level of understanding to this. However, still, that's not why we keep Torah. We do keep it out of obedience, but that's not enough. We do keep it out of Hasidus explaining deeper levels of the mitzvah. That's also true, but it's also not enough. So what is the purpose of us learning Hasidus? The purpose of us learning Hasidus is to enable us to develop one-to-one a private relationship with our God, and to develop nationally and group by group a group relationship with our God. So it's this relationship that defies pigeonholing into reasons and descriptions of halakha and law. Doesn't mean we don't have to keep the law, Doesn't mean we don't have to try and understand it to the best of our ability. I'll give you an example. If you want to say that, first of all, let me ask you, let me do it this way. The Rebbe says, what about if Hasidus is only 300 years old? What were Jews doing for the previous 3,200 years? We've been sitting and learning Torah while the Crusades were going on and they were chopping off the people's heads, and Jews were sitting and learning. What were they? Why weren't they learning Hasidus? And if what they were learning was good enough, what do we need the Hasidus for? And we know it was good enough because Am Yisrael Chai. So what does Hasidus add to the learning that they were doing? So the answer is that what it adds is the exposure of the access to a relationship, which we're going to learn in a minute. It's what it adds is that there is an ability through Hasidus to hug your God and be hugged by your God. And that is a completely different level of serving Hashem. So we'll come back to that. Let's go to the Sedra now. The Sedra begins with this mitzvah of lighting the menorah. Everyone knows what a menorah is, 7 branches. So first of all, let's learn together some obvious properties of the menorah. Menorah, first of all, was pure gold, without any soils. What's the word in English? Without any impurities. Without any impurity, it had to be pure gold. Number 2, it couldn't be interfered with any. It had to be beaten from one solid ingot. So no soldering, no welding, no patching. It had to be beaten out from one solid piece of gold. Now you can imagine that was a very difficult thing, and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know how to do it. Nobody had ever done it before. Hashem gives him the mitzvah of doing this, and so it says that it says in the Midrash that the ingot of gold was thrown into the fire, and out came the menorah. So this is the only mitzvah, and we'll come back to that in a minute, that Hashem actually did for Am Yisrael rather than Am Yisrael doing it for themselves. That menorah has 7 branches. Why? Because there are 7 different manifestations of godliness in every Jew. We learn, there's a very curious passage in Bereshit, which I'm sure you all know, that man was created in the image of God, Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. What does that mean? We know that God doesn't have a body. We know that God doesn't have eyes, nose, any of those things. So what does it mean in his image? So there are 2 basic definitions to this. One has to do with free choice, where we are the only creatures in creation, in all physicality, that have true free choice, and only in certain areas. We haven't got time for that now. And the other area is that Hashem chooses. This is a bit difficult. If anyone gets bored, just coast for a minute. Hashem chooses to manifest himself through what are called the 10 spheros. Now, the 10 spheros are 3 intellectual levels of a person and 7 emotional levels. Those 7 emotional levels are captured by the 7 branches of the candles. In other words, we are serving Hashem through 7 different pathways. And you don't get to choose those pathways, you should understand. You're born with those pathways. Some people are born with more chesed, some people are born with more gevura, some people are born with more netzach. Those, you are hardwired, your neshama is hardwired with one of those seven, or not one, all of those seven, in varying proportions and combinations. And why is that so? Because each person is going to have his opportunity, as we've learned over and over again, to elevate the world by standing firm and succeeding in the nisyonos that we get, in the tests, in the challenges that we get. So every one of us are going to get up every day wishing we didn't have challenges and ignoring the fact that it is the very fact that we have challenges and to give us the opportunity of solving that makes the Dira B'Taktoinim, that makes the dwelling place for Hashem in this world, and that process is the very process for which we're born. In being born for that process, we're born with a combination of these seven levels of emotion, which is represented by the seven branches of the menorah. Now, the menorah was there to give light. And one of the things that, if you want to come to some terms with your own personal identity, at some point of time in your life as a Jew, it has to be when you first realize that your task in this life is to add light. That is the job of a Jew. That's not the job of a Gentile. The job of the Gentile is to make the lamps and to make the wicks and to make all the things that need to be done for Gashmias is done by those who are not Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael's job is to add light. And if you understand that properly, you understand that's a huge weapon against one's own selfishness. It's a huge weapon against one's own self-involvement. And because if you understand that your job is to add light, it's something that you're doing outside of yourself. And paradoxically, we learn that while the menorah is giving this light, or while a Jew is giving off this life, that's when the Jew is really alive. Now, the next thing about the menorah to understand, and this has got nothing to do with the halakhas of the menorah. The halakhas of the menorah, are how tall they have to be, how many branches there are, what the shape of the branches are. It has to have flowers and knops, and there's an argument between the Rambam and as to whether the branches were curved, because there's a Roman sculpture of the menorah. In anybody who's been to Rome seen it, and on the thing somebody's written Am Yisrael Chai, but it's a frieze of people carrying the slaves carrying the menorah, and the menorah is pictured with round arms. So the Rebbe says, so that proves nothing, because the Rambam paskins that the arms were straight, and the Rebbe says that proves nothing at all. How many candles were there in Rome? You know, to light the streets in Rome, they had street lights. Street lights were also menorahs. So you can have curved ones and not curved ones. The menorah that we're talking about had straight arms. Now, it's not enough, explains the Rebbe, for a Jew to be responsible for giving light. And the menorah, by the way, had to be in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Beis HaMikdash was built with the windows, as everybody probably knows, going the wrong way. In other words, instead of the windows being smaller from the outside, they didn't have glass, so smaller from the outside, bigger in the inside, like all castles were built, all medieval castles. That let in the maximum amount of light. In the Beis Hamikdash, the windows went the other way. The small part was in the inside and the large part was on the outside, so that the light would be given off to the outside world. Because that is a Jew's function. A Jew's function is to give light. Now, not only to give light, but to add light. So, elsewhere in a Farbrengen, the Rebbe explains, I'm sure we've had a shir on this, I can't remember what is in our shirim and what Farbrengen about, but there's a Farbrengen where the Rebbe asks the question on what's the difference between power and influence. We've been through this? If you think, what's the difference between power and influence? It sounds like it's the same thing. It sounds like if you're powerful, you influence. And it sounds like if you're influenced, you have power. Otherwise, how can you influence? The Rebbe explains they're very different things. Power, when you divide power, you decrease it. So let's say you have a business and you make cars, and you make we were talking about electric cars. So you make electric cars. So you make one electric car, it works, another. Soon you're making enough cars that but you're the boss, you're the worker, you're the boss, you make all the decisions. When you're starting to make 10 cars at a time, you need staff. And the staff won't stay there forever. You're frightened that they'll take the ideas and leave. So you have to make them directors of your company. So you make them directors of your company. One guy's in charge of sales, one guy's in charge of manufacturing, supplying spare parts. I don't know the business, right? But you have various directors who are in charge of various areas. When you appoint those directors, you are lessening your power. Why? Because you're dividing your power. If you've got a guy in charge of sales and somebody comes and makes a complaint, you'd be a fool if you're running a good business not to support this man, because you need him. So one crazy who's got a complaint, whether the complaint's right or not, you need to support this. So this guy is taking away from your power. Admittedly, you want it that way, but that's the way it is. Until finally, if you have a big enough company and you have enough people on the board, you're left with very little power. So what happens with power is that as the subject of the power is increased, the more you divide that power, the less you're left with. On the other hand, with influence, it doesn't work like that. It's completely the opposite. If you have a Rebbe, and a Rebbe influences one man to go out on shlichus and talk to other Jews, the Rebbe is lighting his candle. He takes his candle and he goes out on shlichus and lights another candle, and another candle, and another candle, and another candle, and every candle that's lit does nothing to minimize the flame on the previous candle. Right? Everybody understands that. So when you're dividing power, you're lessening the power. When you're dividing influence, you're adding influence to it. The menorah not only requires that each Jew in one of those 7 categories, together with all the remaining categories, the 7 together with the 1 together with the remaining 6 in whatever proportions it is. Not only does he need to give light, but he needs to give light to others and to everybody and to everywhere, and that doesn't detract from his power or his light. On the contrary, it just means that more light is available for the world. Okay. So then it says that the menorah had to be lit by Aaron HaKohen. Aaron was the Kohen Gadol. Aaron was Moshe's brother, as you know, and he was chosen by Hashem to light to put up the first lights on the menorah. Why? Because he oyev shalom v'roidev shalom. It means that he loved peace and chased after peace. And we learn from that, according to our Rebbe, that it's not enough for a Jew to stay at home and light his candle in the dark in his own home. He's got to take that light out. He's got to take that light to other people. And that light has to be available to, Rebbe uses the example of a tzaddik in pilz, as it's called. It's Yiddish for, it's freezing cold outside, right? There are two ways you can warm yourself. You can sit there in a fur coat. That's the tzaddik in pilz. That's the example of sitting in a fur coat and warming yourself, and you'll be warm. Or you could warm the room. You warm the room, then everybody in the room gets the benefit of the warmth. So the menorah and Aaron HaKohen continue with this accent on giving light, giving warmth, sharing, and doing so notwithstanding the individual differences that each and every one of us have. And no two people are going to be alike, obviously, and no two people are going to have the same tests, obviously, and no two people can successfully manage and discharge that responsibility. But the one of the very empowering things is to understand that that's why we live. And if you think and it's very hard because we have a nefesh elokis and a nefesh habahamis. We have an animal soul and a godly soul. And the animal soul's in charge most of the time, as it has to be. The animal soul has to earn a living and pay the bills and fix their kids' teeth and whatever it is. Put out the garbage, clean the floors, do the washing up. All of those things are ordered by the animal soul, and we have to live with that. So most of our focus is on doing non-kedusha activity. But the truth is that for a Jew, one has to learn and train himself to understand that all of that holy activity has to be for a holy purpose. And that holy purpose is to live a life as a Jew. And that means that in every spare moment that you're not doing something which is gashmias, you're doing something with your nefesh elokis. And that means learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And every mitzvah that we do improves not only the world by adding light, but improves one's own life and one's own perspective. Okay. So I'm going to keep going with the outside before we go to the inside. So the halakha of the menorah, we've done some, but I'll give you another one. That there are three aspects to the menorah which are a matter of halakha. The first one is this, that the candles, the 7 lights, they're not candles, they're cruisers of oil. Those lights can be lit by any Jew in the Beis HaMikdash. Didn't have to be a Kohen, didn't have to be a holy Jew. Any Jew had the power to light the candles. Number 2, only Kohanim could prepare the wicks and the fire. Not an ordinary Jew was not allowed to do that. And finally, the menorah could only be lit in the Beis HaMikdash, in a special place in the Beis HaMikdash. So Hasidus teaches that, that's the halakha. That's what they were learning for 3,000 years until Hasidus came. And Jews obeyed that, and they understood what that had to do with the ashes, and they understood what that had to do with all the details of the halakha. What Hasidus came to explain was that when it says that the menorah can be lit by anyone, it's not only that it can be lit by anyone, it must be lit by everyone. Every Jew has a sacred task in his 60, 70, 120 years to light another Jew. And that's what the mitzvah of Peru Veru means. Peru Veru means be fruitful and multiply. I think that's the literal translation. Peru means fruitful, Revu means multiply. Peru Veru has a physical aspect, obviously. The Torah says that a man leaves his family and his wife leaves her parents, and they cleave together, I think is the English translation, and become one flesh. What does it mean, cleave together and become one flesh? They give birth to a third human being. But the Hasidus of that is that that's not all a Jew does, not only the physical work of producing a new human being, it's of improving the life of an existing human being, of a Jew. By bringing him to Torah and to Hasidus, you add to his life. So Hasidus explains that the first step of this, where it says that that any Jew can light the menorah, every Jew has the obligation to do so. Number two, that only the Kohanim can prepare the wicks and the flame. You can't just use anything. You can't have Chaim Yankel walking the streets of Double Bay and inventing his own Torah, and then saying, well, I'm going to light your light with my Torah that I've just invented. Can't do that. We have to light his light with real Torah, with genuine, 100%, non-compromise, no baloney, no additions, no subtractions, proper Torah. So you have to get that from someone who knows what it is. You have to get that from a Talmud Chacham, from somebody who knows how to learn, who's learned it properly, and who can teach it properly. And you and I have got it. So we go to they're rabbis, competent rabbis who teach properly, and then over them we have a rebbe. At the end of the day, who is the absolute vetting of any modern additions that people wanted to do. And you know, with a Rebbe, it makes an enormous difference. I've said this in the shir before, and I know Rabbi Feldman will forgive me for saying it because he's told it to me openly, so he didn't tell me in secret. But I'll give you an example. Rabbi Feldman Nebuch was struggling for money from the day he arrived in Australia. He wanted to do big things, and he tried to do big things, and big things cost a lot of money, and it was very difficult for him always to find the money. So at one point, there was, Lowy had a partner called George Saunders, Oliver Sholem, and George Saunders came to see Rabbi Feldman one day, and he said, you know what, I want to have a Yad Vashem in Sydney. I want to have a Holocaust museum in Sydney. I will pay for it. I'll donate it. We'll build it next door to Yeshiva, and you'll charge admission, and that will give the Yeshiva an income, and Sydney will have a place to bring school children, hopefully not only Jewish school children, on the contrary, non-Jewish school children, to see what Holocaust means, what it was. And Rabbi Feldman was Besimcha Rabbi. It was for him, it was Simcha's Torah. He was so happy. And I remember when he wrote into the Rebbe, we were good friends, and he used to share these things with me. And he wrote into the Rebbe. In those days, we already had a fax. So he sent a fax into the Rebbe. for a brocha for this Holocaust center. And he got a reply. I thought he was going to faint. He looked like he was about to cry, not just burst out crying, but cry and really cry. You know what the Rebbe said? The Rebbe said it's not kedai, it's not appropriate to profit from the kedoshim. Right? That's what he said. And from that moment, of course, the Rabbi Feldman is a Hasid of the Rebbe, and from that moment, finished. He was shelved, and the Holocaust Center was finally built in Darlinghurst, you know where it is now. Yeah. Right? But that's why.
By whom?
By George Saunders.
John.
Yeah, well, he got other people to join him with it, but he was the driving force. So, but why am I telling you this? Because the flame has to be prepared by a Kohen. In other words, there are new things that happen all the time, and you need a Rebbe to paskin on it. It looked very tempting to Rabbi Feldman. Don't forget, he was Negaya Badova. He was a judge in his own cause. Obviously, this was going to solve his money problem, so it sounded terrific to him. But the Rebbe said, no, it's not appropriate, right? When everybody, you guys weren't here, but before the Russians were released. People were demonstrating all the time outside the embassies, outside the Russian embassy. Rebbe was very against it. Rebbe told people to stop it. Why? Because it doesn't work with the Russians. It just makes it harder. So you need the wicks and the flame have to be prepared by a Kohen, somebody who knows what they're doing. And finally, the menorah has to be in the Beis HaMikdash. What does that mean? It has to be in the Beis HaMikdash. That we have, insofar as it's your and my responsibility to light each other's fires, but it has to be with proper, pure oil. In other words, you have to take you have to bring a Jew to Torah, not take the Torah to a Jew. You can't compromise the Torah to I remember I was horrified. We were at some lecture 100 years ago where they were talking about Jewish continuity, and this person was suggesting that if they had Israeli dancing in synagogues on Friday night, you would have Jewish continuity, right? We don't learn like that. Israeli dancing doesn't take the place of Torah. Torah is Torah. It's got to be pure Torah, not watered down Torah, not with all due respect to sportsmen, hakoah, with the football. It's wonderful that Jews play football. But if you think that Jewish continuity is going to come from Maccabi, then you don't understand Jewish continuity at all. Jewish continuity is with Torah. So the Torah so when you convince somebody to keep a mitzvah, and that has to be done without preaching, and that has to be done nicely, out of love, not out of criticism, and he takes on that mitzvah, the idea is to take on the mitzvah and keep it forever, and and cherish it. You don't have to do all 613 mitzvahs at once. You take on one mitzvah, you put on mezuzahs, for example, and you cherish those mezuzahs. You put on film for the first time. You do it with a resolution to put it on more than once. Hopefully to get to the point where you do it every day. But to take on all 613 mitzvahs, you go to shul in a swimming costume on Monday, and Tuesday you turn up in a kapota. It doesn't work. That's no good. It needs to be done. So the menorah has to be lit in the Beis HaMikdash, meaning that the mitzvahs have to be kept pristine. Now, how will I get finished here? So, in the beginning of this week's Sedra, in the first sentence, it says that, maybe it's the second sentence, it says that Aaron was given the job by Hashem to light the menorah the first time, and that he did so. And all the commentators remark that this is a statement of praise about Aaron, that he did so. But they ask, are you serious? Honestly, if God appeared to you or me and told us to light the menorah, wouldn't you light it? What's the big deal that he did so? So the commentator said, no, he did so without any deviation. He did it exactly, right? Same question. If God appeared to you and told you to light the menorah in using step 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order, you're not going to change that order if you heard it from God. So the question is, why? Why does the Torah find it necessary to praise Aaron, saying that he did so? And first of all, how many other mitzvahs are there in the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron and even their sister were given? And they kept all the mitzvahs in a pristine manner, and nowhere in the Torah does it remark that he did so as a matter of praise. So why? So we need to take a detour, which is probably half an hour, and we have 4 minutes, but I'll try and do it in 4 minutes. You know, there is a level where you relate not to steps of an activity, like lighting the menorah, where that's taken for granted. But then there's a deeper level, which is where we started in this year, with the Rebbe started in the Sikha, where there's a deeper level that you're doing it because of the relationship. I'll give you an example. Take a good marriage, a really good marriage. Now, a good marriage can't be based on reason, because if you marry a woman because, then you've got a big problem, because when the because changes, what do you do then? If you marry her because she's beautiful, she's going to stop being beautiful. If you marry her because she's rich, she may lose her money. If you marry her because she's kind, she may have run into troubles in her life, which changes that. If you marry her because she loves you, she may stop loving you. What do you do? To have a marriage is, understand this, that we don't believe in marriage as a social contract. We don't believe in marriage as the best way to live harmoniously, the best way to have a sexual partner. We don't believe in any of that. We believe all of that can happen without marriage. Why do we get married as Jews? Because it is a religious obligation. A Jew has to be married. Has to be married, and has to have and not commit adultery, and try and have children.
So
and,
why is it?
Because God says so. Because it's a mitzvah. That's why we get married, because it's a mitzvah, not because it's a socially acceptable thing to do. One of the products of this is, if you're going to get married for life, because you're marrying for a mitzvah, which is what religious Jews do, then you have to build a relationship which is a relationship irrespective of those reasons. Because when the reasons change, what are you doing there? But if it's because you understand that she is the other half of your soul, and that she is the mother of your children, and that she's going to be the grandmother of your grandchildren and great-grandchildren and until Mashiach comes, and that you're in partnership with her to build a dira b'taktoinim, to build a better world for people outside of you and her, then you build a real relationship. So then let's take an example. Let's say that she wants to please you. She wants to please you, so she cooks you good food. This is a poor example in my house, but I'm going to give it anyway. So, bless her, my wife doesn't like to cook. So, but let's say that there's a woman who loves to cook. A lot of Jewish wives love to cook and feed their husbands. And there's a myth that husbands are kept happy by food. Let's say that's true. So she cooks him this delicious dinner, and he comes home from work, and it's in the oven, and he eats the delicious dinner, and he loves it. But the problem is that she's in Parramatta playing on the poker machines while he's eating his dinner. And next night she's somewhere else, and the next night she's somewhere else. So he's getting a wonderful dinner. He likes the dinner just as much as if she's there. But how can you compare the dinner with her there than with her being in Parramatta on the poker machines? So if the dinner is a dinner which is a product of the relationship, then the dinner has a different level of enjoyment and nachas and satisfaction than it does if it's just the taste of the food. The taste of the food on its own doesn't do it. So what the Rebbe explains here is a really deep thing, that sure, Jews have been keeping Torah and mitzvahs for 3,000 years until Chassidus came. And they were doing it, they were making wonderful dinners. Right? And they were doing everything exactly. Just as Aaron was lighting the candles exactly, Jews were keeping Torah and mitzvahs exactly. In fact, they built fences around the Torah. They built all sorts of precautions that they shouldn't go wrong. However, what they weren't able to understand was that there's a different level to that, and that level is a level of relationship. And Chassidus introduced the pathway to developing that relationship with your God privately. That means that you can stand in front of your God and talk to him honestly. He knows how many mitzvahs you do and how much you don't do, and whether your socks match or whether they don't match, and whether this is important and that's. He knows all of it, right? He's your God. And the whole business of being an observant Jew becomes quite different. Of course you've got to keep the mitzvahs. Of course you've got to keep them exactly. Of course you've got to do everything that we're supposed to do in Shulchan Aruch. But there's a different level to it if you understand that you have the opportunity, by doing those mitzvahs, to reach Hashem at his essence, at his absolute, it's called Atzmus u'Mechus, his absolute essence. Because mitzvahs, we are told, is not just the Chochmah of Hashem, the wisdom of Hashem, which is, you'll hear that phrase a lot. Oh, we keep the mitzvahs because it's the wisdom of Hashem. Sure, we do. But more than that, the mitzvahs go actually all the way to his essence, and he's infinite. So you're talking about an infinite essence and connecting to an infinite essence. That's a different kind of life. One's a level of life where you are an obedient servant, 100%, kol hakavod. But the other level is one where, as an obedient servant, you have the privilege of sitting down and talking to your God, of conversing to him, of hugging him, of living with him, inviting him into your home and into your life and into your presence. When you're doing the shopping and putting out the garbage and all of that. And that's what Chassidus has given us. By learning the Chassidus that we learn that there is a heart and soul to the body of the Torah. Okay, so the only thing is to
make sure that the answer
make sure that what?
That he answers us.
Yeah, that's right. He answers us.
How many pages do you have? 7?
I got to 3. There's 4 there that I didn't do, and 5. And